doing things, or are
Oh
you?
yeah,
Yeah.
I actually am going to work late today because I work at like 9 a.m. So
And you're going to work late because you're here with us.
yeah, I just shift the
Oh,
shift around
oh, thank you.
faster, so he's understanding.
It's weird. I'm now hearing, for some reason, I'm hearing the old conversation. Isn't
That's
that weird?
strange.
I don't know why.
Hmm.
Are you?
I don't know.
It stopped.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. It was weird. I was hearing weirdness, but that's okay. So as long as we're hearing weirdness, maybe we should take
Hmm.
that as our cue to to go to try. All right. So we're getting questions
Hmm.
both from our team human
Hmm.
peoples in the not just questions, but statements and concerns, topics from our Discord. Those get prioritized for real team human paying subscribers, but we're also taking them right through YouTube live as we speak. Wherever this is coming out, there's a place to put back in. And you're all welcome to do that. And then that gets delivered by our henchmen directly to Brenna, who can then choose whether and how to bring it in. So, what does someone want to talk about first?
All right. First up, we have a Discord regular, Crace Lunker. They ask, you've alluded recently to thinking about such pessimistic sounding ideas about what American authoritarianism might be like and how to navigate it, as opposed to just how to avoid it. Me too. I'm interested in any thoughts you've landed on about that. Like, say Trump wins and say he does all of the things we wouldn't want him to do, and he's a dictator in America as we know it is, which feels depressingly plausible. What then? And perhaps more importantly, what now until then?
Yay! Yeah, I. It's interesting. I think the best ways, I've said this about climate change, but I think it's true of authoritarianism as well. You know, that the best ways to avoid falling into authoritarianism are likely also the best strategies for dealing with it if and when it comes. You know, community, anarchism, mutual aid, knowing your neighbors, depending as little as possible on top down things and as much on one another. Um, it will be good for everything because I mean the more you know and depend on your neighbors, the harder it is for somebody on TV or Twitch or Twitter or whatever to make you think that they're an enemy or scary or horrible. It's just like you have too much evidence that other people are nice. So you know, having a community, having friends, engaging with other humans, it really helps because you know authoritarianism is about I think it's about blame. So when this is the tricky part, like you could say like Trump or someone like him is going to come into office, and then you think, well, things are going to be so bad, right? That he's going to be giving tax breaks to the wealthiest crooks, and people will get poor, and public services will decline, and things will get so awful and violent and terrible that people would just vote them out, right? But no, the authoritarian regime then uses all that bad stuff to like blame the Jews for stealing the money, or blame the immigrants for replacing them at work, or blame the trans people for uh, um, high budget health care and decadent library books and you know all the things that we need an authoritarian leader to stop. But you know, there's also, you know, and I'm watching the kids at the protests these days and thinking a lot about what rhetoric works for them and where they're going over the line. And there's also a kind of a leftward authoritarianism that looks a little bit different, more like, well, there's pain and suffering in the world. But rather than truly understanding it systemically, we can just kind of blame today's white people for their colonialist settler legacy, or these ones for administrating the extractive policies and business practices of the super elite. And we're going to find them and kind of purge the individuals and cancel the ones we can identify as collaborators and so on and so on. So for me, authoritarianism feels more like a weather system, more like an environmental, kids call it a vibe, but it's not like a vibe from a place. It's more like it feels more like weather or an atmosphere. And it's an atmosphere of blame. It's a very polarized atmosphere of blame, very digital, or at least today's version. And the antidote to blame is solidarity. It's acknowledgement of our common precarity, and committing to mutual aid and mutual care. If it's funny, I started researching all these other places where authoritarianism happened, because I started to think, okay, it's happening. We're going. So it's like, well, what happened with Pinochet? What happened with Duterte, whatever his name is, and all these places where there were authoritarian regimes. And, it was bad for the poor. The upper middle class kind of squeaked by, and eventually it kind of ended in most places. They kind of push it away eventually somehow. And then I was thinking, well, it's like authoritarianism in the US may not look so different than well, I'm falling. It may not look so different than what people are currently getting. It's my new Staples chair from the authoritarian regime mail order. I needed my other chair was falling apart on me. But this one just kind of dropped me down. It was fun. But the problem is, like, when Chile or Argentina or Hungary becomes authoritarian, it like kind of sucks for them, but it's a country that's become authoritarian. If America turns that inward and becomes authoritarian, that has big impact on a lot of other people. We're kind of more than a country right now. And you could say, oh, that's good. They'll get out of Thailand or Taiwan and get out of here and get out of Ukraine. And yeah. But there's a lot of people in a lot of places who will be very much affected by us turning inward like that. So I kind of feel like if America goes authoritarianism, it may be worse for some other places than for us. But to the main question, I think the way we avoid it and deal with it is in our approach to whoever it is that we consider to be the other, and stop thinking of them in that infection way. It's funny, there's a video of the Columbia protest encampment that I saw. And the protest encampments have been really sweet for the most part. They're very Occupy Wall Street, Burning Man, encounter group, folk singing. Once the president of the school kind of arrested people, everybody came out, and it became in some ways a little bit less about the issues and a little bit more about the protests themselves. So they're actually pretty sweet. But then I saw this video of somebody came into the camp with like cameras, and they were like photographing people. And then you hear one of the activists said, Zionists have infiltrated the camp. The Zionists are here. Let's link arms to push out the Zionists. And I was thinking, I get it. Those people came in and they had the problem with the people who came into the camp, though, was not that they were Zionists, right? That word. It's like the problem with the people who came into the camp was there are people who've come in and are breaking our rules and are photographing us right now. We should pull. So that's very different. It's like when you punish a child, you don't say you're a bad child. You say that behavior was bad or that behavior was wrong. So you don't, and I feel like it's sort of right in that moment was the thing. Once you label and go, oh no, we've been infected by an invasive species, that's authoritarian language, right? Like it's from Pharaoh, right? He said it in the Bible. Like insects, the Israelites will replicate. It's like we are infected by this. They're going to poison our blood. That's the part to push through, that reaction, I think. And that's That's hard, especially when we feel like we're in battle. But I think that's the challenge right now. God, that was long. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Um, Fascism, authority. It's a big one, though. I mean, are you scared of it, of
Yeah.
authoritarianism?
I I mean, sure. I mean, I think about it a lot, but I also, I guess, something that's helped me a lot with dealing with that is following if you're on social media, following people who have gone through it in a non-activist space, because I think activism is a good tool, but it also sits in this anxiety and anger zone. And if you're not involved and you're only following activists, you're kind of in yourself in a way. I follow a lot of indigenous people because they're effectively already living under an authoritarian kind of system. They've been through it. So kind of to somatically align with those people is helpful to me because yeah, they know how to be calm, ready to act. And I think a lot of times, and this is a very white perspective, obviously, but a lot of times when white people see a new bad thing coming and it might affect us, we freeze up. So like I think that yeah, just if you're white, following marginalized people is really important. Following people in other countries is really important. That's just the online version of kind of looking at people who are ahead of you on that.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. It's why, I started following and follow, not social media wise, but like just following his writing, Tyson Yunkaporta, who's a Australian Aboriginal, but also like intellectual. So kind of a nerdy brain like me has an inroad to the way he kind of thinks all systemically and all. So he's my interface with that indigenous wisdom. But yeah, it's always like, oh, these people breathe. It's like it's like the basics. It's like something happens. It's like, well, what if you breathe first? What if you put your feet on the ground? What if you see these larger cycles? So that it's different. Although I'll tell you, I had this weird experience. I know for a little blue state, a blue state New Yorker like me, I went to South Dakota State University to do a talk there about it was the survival of the richest kind of a thing. And I thought that who's going to care there about that? But it's like after the talk, these kids came up, like freshman, sophomore students from the school who are like raised, they were in a one-room schoolhouse from K to 12, and are true farm kids raised on farms, in it where you would have to drive miles to get to anybody else, and that we might assume are not kind of worldly in a way, yet their knowledge of no-till farming and inputs and outputs on soil and soil maintenance and the way big agri is buying up farms and setting prices, the way why it's so difficult to maintain ownership and how tax policies and government policies and subsidies are working against them. Their ability to do systems thinking about what was going on, they understood what I was saying better than when I go to one of these elite East Coast colleges with all the sort of business and tech students who are going to be running these companies. And I felt like the kids they understood that these guys that I'm talking about are building layers of abstraction on reality. Yet they are still in reality, these ones. And the different ways that laws and policies are drawn up to favor the abstractions over the real, and their commitment to the real, but then their ability, because I just described all the layers, financialization and derivatives and derivatives and derivatives and all that stuff. I described that, and they could see and understand exactly, not necessarily all the levels I was talking about, but the abstraction is a verb and the way it intentionally undermines. That was interesting. Did you hear that? I heard
Oh
a
yeah,
thing
that's a
through my-
bird.
Okay. I heard a thing through my headphones. Maybe I have another tab open or something. I don't know. It's so hard. Um, but yeah, so it's their understanding of these problems was so much clearer and practical, that it feels like uh, they are kind of redeveloping uh, a different kind of something analogous to the indigenous sensibility, if only because, well, like you, they're in the real world, they're seeing real plants, real things grow, and what are the impediments to it. So it was reassuring, to say the least. Do you want to? Oh, should we? Let's go to another. Let's go to another topic, question, idea from our community.
Yes. All right. Ian asks, I recently picked up your book, Team Human, and I have just reached the pages where you dive into the notions of figures becoming ground. Your words about online classes on pages 46 to 48 resonated with me deeply. As a college student who went through COVID's need for online classes, I found myself struggling with a strange issue of object permanence, where I would completely forget about assignments because they were online. I'm curious to know if and how your ideas on online classes have changed post-COVID, since a vast majority of classes in at least my university now use a plethora of online methods. Also, did you have an I called it moment after you published the book?
Oh, I live for those I called it moments. I try not to do it too much, though. To I told you so. I told you so. Because as my writing got more negative, I want to be less right. You know, I want to be, I keep writing now with the hope of being pleasantly surprised. And in every book I always do, we can still do this. The internet could still be a place where we could turn to each other, and that's why now it's like I had that we did that Team Human episode with a live one with Mitch Horowitz, where it was like, let's just do a spell, to flip everything. But yeah, I guess I did change a little bit in my thinking about online classes. I think originally thought online learning would be best for the most factual stuff. Like, if I'm going to do a lecture on history or something, then why not let it be online? Because that's already kind of passive and it's just a one-way thing. But I guess I learned first in doing events, and then in teaching, that it's actually the opposite, that online, if you're going to do something online, you want to counteract the video canned quality with something as live. I mean, like what's why you're here. You know what I mean? Let's make this a live exchange rather than me sitting in a box somewhere. Let's set this up as social. And it seems that factual classes are the worst thing to try to do online, and the best thing to do are interactive classes, because computers are interactive. It's not television. So the stuff that seems to work best for me are the most liberal, artsy kind of poetry type classes, the discussions and debates, and everybody has their friggin' camera on, not these little, pictures, or worse, just their name as a word, and they reluctantly kind of click the thing on, when they're here. So yeah, the thing that I was pleasantly surprised by is if people already kind of know each other, their ability to go into a Zoom room and have a great conversation is real, a real conversation. But the minute that people are not are sitting and watching what's happening, it's way harder for these spaces to work as education. So yeah, as long as it's grounded in a social reality and feels back and forth, I don't think it's so bad. I could see doing this, but not what I did during COVID was did video lectures and put them up in a thing, and everybody was using a big interface, and there was nothing. It was asynchronous online, and it was just like, what am I doing? What's happening here? Whereas the some live seminar discussions felt like, I felt energized after that. After clicking the Zoom off thing, I could, so I was kind of pleasantly surprised by that. It's the whole thing with
Well,
also with AI too. Liberal arts, are back.
I was going to say I haven't
Yeah.
been in education in a while, but Hollywood writers' rooms have gone to online, a lot of people. And my friends say it's a totally different vibe because you're missing the kind of chaff. So you're
Mm.
missing these kind of side conversations happening. You're missing the interruptions. You're kind of missing being side by side with somebody. So it definitely
Mm.
affects that in a way. And I wonder how much that kind of affects the classroom probably as well.
Yeah, I mean, you lose some of the good and some of the bad. It's weird. I was in a writer's room once. I watched them do the years and years ago, the Simpsons writer room, not as a participant, but because I was writing. That was back when writers could get access to things because not everyone was a writer. And I was shocked by how I found it really scary and competitive. And it's like, wow, how could you be funny when you've got like your bosses are in the room judging if you're funny and the rest of this room? It was like, I guess that's what Harvard Lampoon culture is like. It's kind of an aggressive humor, but it was like, oh wow, I would be totally unable to do that. Maybe online I could maybe do it. I don't know, but I know what you mean. It's, yeah, you miss a whole lot. But if you're gonna have, if I guess if you're gonna do a class online, I would much rather it be, let us talk about this, you know, Pablo Neruda poem together than I'm going to show you, the evaporation point of methane or something. It's like I'm just the more humanized, the more conversant, the more of a kind of debatey thing it is, the more fun it gets.
All right. Do you want another question?
Sure, let's see what else there is. I have secret access to your
We've got
document too.
Content Carrier, another Discord regular.
Yes.
Our
Another
editor in
advantage of
chief of the
being a
magazine I
member.
write for.
Sorry, to say another advantage of being a subscribing member of the Team Human community. Okay, yeah.
Our editor in chief of the magazine I write for believes we should start asking questions to LLMs about certain topics. We cover all things regarding freight and logistics. The idea would be to publish a statement by, say, ChatGPT and to contrast it with an opinion by an industry person. It sounded like a fairly harmless exercise at first, but then another idea dawned on me. Our lead editor has written a large corpus of articles over the years. He's approaching retirement, and I began to wonder if we could train a GPT based on his writing, just to serve the exercise, of course. Still a little hesitant to propose it, but the genie surely is out of the bottle now. What question would you ask the ChatGPT trained on your writing, Rushkoff, and what do you expect the answer would be?
I mean, I'd be a little scared, if I put all my stuff in there. And it's like there was some episode at near the end of the second season of Westworld, the HBO show, where they go to this library, and it turns out that, like, every human being has this little book that is their code, and that they narrow down every human being, like, oh, look at this, you're just like 70 pages of code is your whole everything could be determined about you. And I guess the fear would be, if I put all my books and talks and things into one of these things and then asked it stuff, it would come out with what I would actually do. And then it's like, oh, I'm just a program. I'm just this little algorithm. But what I actually done is I actually tried to use ChatGPT to help me write a graphic novel I'm working on. And it's a graphic novel about kind of tech bros who ultimately are turning themselves into AIs. So it was kind of a fun story to bring to it. But this is a great guy. He's a guy who knows. He's a comic, Greg Barris. I've had him on the show, and he knows how to use this stuff. And he's been helping write, different things, and write comedy and program robots with this stuff. And he helps people use it. And he was really trying to show me, here, you just put all this stuff on the left side, all your books, and the story idea and the thing, and then on the right side you ask it these questions. And I had it work on a scene that I had already written, and like the middle third of the scene was the same scene that I wrote. I mean, it came up with like two or three of the same ideas, the same stuff. And I looked at that, and then what I thought was, well, if the AI came up with that, that's the part I'm going to change, right? That's the part that's predictable, whether it's predictably dug or just predictable content because it's read every graphic novel that has been written up to 2022 or whatever its memory stops. It means that that's the cliche, right? That's the perfect one. That's the Avengers one. That's the whatever it is. So I'm starting to think about like using AI as almost a cheat check to see when, if you've, I mean, you've written fiction especially, and you know the thing that happens is like you can write through inspiration, and then if you kind of keep writing after the inspiration is over just because you want to get more done, you end up, or you're in a part of the story you haven't really thought about or let germinate or gestate long enough, you end up writing from the things that you've seen. It's like, oh right, that's kind of like a variation on that scene from Godzilla, -1, or that's this thing, that's that, and you start relying on everything else. That's all that ChatGPT can do, right? It's that assemble that stuff from everything else. So the thing I'm liking about it is to use it to check my work and see if it comes up with anything that overlaps what I've done, then that means that thing is suspect, and I should look, because it means there's no new life in there. There's no novelty in it. So that's really that's where I'm interested in it. I'm still afraid to do it. For me, that it's going to just swallow me up, or I'll find out that I'll wait a little bit longer in my career before I discover that I'm truly that replaceable, that the opus is closed ended. But for now, I'm using it to kind of check, almost as if I was cheating, as if I'm using it to see where did I cheat in developing this idea, and what needs to be refreshed. You don't
I
play
think
with this
it's really
stuff.
interesting. No, I don't. I kind of avoid it. I think the thing to me about putting all your work in there is it doesn't have a sense of time or evolution. So it kind of assumes, like ceteris paribus, all other things held constant, because it's just it's going to give the same weight to a live journal post I made when I was 14, thing that I wrote last week. And like it might be my words, but it doesn't know where I'm at right now. And so to me, like that feels like it's kind of a very reductive version of you that doesn't have your life experiences. My I might have a song that I wrote that I used a butterfly as a metaphor because I happened to see a butterfly that day, and an AI can't calculate that. It can do kind of a mean of what I'm about, but it can't really do the here's what I saw in this moment and here's what I've been thinking about this a lot because I just watched the first episode of Gerard Carmichael's reality show. And the reason I watched is because I was at one of the live shows that they filmed. And it was a really vulnerable, heart-wrenching show to watch. And it's like stuck with me. And to see what actually became public about it was very, very little. And it almost felt like a kind of Rashomon thing
Huh.
where I was like, well, that's not what happened in that hour. There was so much more to that show than what was shown on the TV. And if you were to ask an AI, what's Gerard Carmichael's opinion on Z, it would only have that little tiny, tiny snippet that made it to air. So it feels like it would be a really reductive and ultimately kind of useless version of you to talk to if it's an AI version of you,
Right. And then
because
you
it
think
doesn't see
about,
all the stuff that isn't there.
right. I mean, then you think about the AI in nonfiction. So if AI is looking at coverage of current events or coverage of a protest or coverage of a, you know, there, it doesn't know, it really doesn't understand the context. So it's the kind of history recorded by an AI or rendered by an AI will seem so authoritative to people because it's going to be written out in beautiful sentences and all. But it's like, no, 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 no. This is just creating the illusion of continuity in fragmented bits of very edited and biased stuff. You know, so it's going to be, that'll be even weirder, you know. Who
Yeah,
else we
I
got?
don't.
Oh,
Let's see. We have uh, an Italian journalist asks, what distinguishes these protests from historical ones like the Vietnam War student protests or Occupy Wall Street? During the Vietnam War, the U.S. was directly involved in the conflict and students were conscripted into the army. Do you believe we're in a different era now? What do these protests communicate, particularly to young people, about war? Are there parallels with the Occupy Wall Street movement? Why do you think the arrests during Occupy Wall Street took place after several weeks of protests, whereas students were arrested after just one day this time?
right. Okay. Yeah, into the fray we go. This is like my it's cancellation territory. It's like all my cancellation guards are on. But it's okay. I'm late career, so cancellation's not as bad as if I was like in my 20s or something. I have all this room left. I think he's talking about the Columbia student protests about you know the war in the Middle East. Um, and while I'm not an expert in them, I am watching them both on the news and kind of through my daughter's experience because she's at Barnard now, which is a school at Columbia. Occupy was different in that Occupy had a very intentionally broad mandate without specific demands. I don't know, Brenda, were you alive? I mean, you were alive. Were you like
Yeah, yeah.
were you like in high school then, or you were young
Let's
for
see. I think
Occupy?
that was post high school. I'm 38,
Oh,
so
well, sure, you're a grown up. All right.
whatever.
You're,
Yeah, I'm an adult.
yeah. All right. So yeah, 20
I'm an
years ago,
adult, damn it.
you were conscious. You were conscious. But remember, it was like solidarity kind of against global capitalism and all of its many tentacles. So we were, and I'm saying we, although I was a little old for Occupy, I still consider myself an occupier, and that I was there and writing about it and assisting and doing tech support and some academic support. But it was kind of occupying reality as this new normative state of protest and solidarity and rebellion. And I know later Naomi Wolf, not Klein, she kind of jumped in with this list of demands because the media was asking for what are your demands, but we actually didn't have those. We were being intentionally kind of Gen X in this desire to kind of thwart the news media oversimplification of our discontent and our precarity. Right? It was precarity of all kinds, you know, climate and social justice and just all these different ways that global capitalism was rendering us precarious. And today's protests, I mean, if you go to Columbia campus, they have very clear demands, right? Like, we want an immediate ceasefire. We want the endowment of this school to divest from Israeli businesses, or we want to do a secondary boycott on businesses who conduct business with any business who does business with Israel, or whatever people call the other side. We want, you know, or you look at the group, I mean, I guess you call it the other side to the main protest. You know, they want the release of any Israeli hostages. They want an agreement, a universal agreement over the right for Israel to defend itself, or the acceptance of a Jewish presence in the Middle East. So people are really specific. So while the encampments on these campuses look way similar, the agenda setting is different. You know, the advantage, I guess, if there was one to the Occupy style, is that it was open to a whole lot of kind of competing narratives about history. When you start with a demand, you tend to kind of retrofit history to that demand, and you ignore the other side's claim or their historical record if it conflicts or competes with your demand. And that's tricky because we've got two valid narratives for what has happened there that are incompatible with each other. So there's also, I guess, and maybe this happened in Occupy as well, but there's a lot more protest and counter protest around the encampments than in the encampments. The encampments themselves are pretty mellow for the most part, but around it, like you go to Broadway and the street where the non-students are protesting, that's where they're like burning Israeli flags or calling every protester a Hamas member or saying we are on Hamas or these ones should die, and that's media is covering that. Media loves that. They don't like 1,000 peaceful, boring people, they like, video of someone saying, go home to Romania or go home to Gaza. That gets viewers. But the protests themselves, a lot like Occupy Wall Street, it felt like the eye of a hurricane. There's this, it's so peaceful compared to the surrounding areas. If you're feeling endangered by something, go to the center of the encampment and you'll actually feel safe. It's around it is the mess. I think another problem in this is that college kids. I don't know whether this is true, and I feel like college kids are being given more attention than they quite know how to handle. Not all of them, but a lot of these kids have just recovered from the Taylor Swift Eras tour, right? And now they're at ground zero of America's conflict over the woke, anti-woke, the Middle East, the legacy of colonialism. I mean, that's a big step up, And the difference between Vietnam and this, I think he wanted to know. I mean, obviously, yeah, those people in Vietnam, a lot of them were up for being drafted into the war, and most of these kids aren't. But a lot of people in these protests have a friend or family member who was killed or affected or hostaged, or they're at many of them are at worst once removed. And even for those who aren't once removed, I don't think it's spoiled or hypocritical to be waking up to the plight of other people in other places. I would just hope, as I always do whenever it's Israel's turn, I would hope that this is the first. This is the first of many humanitarian atrocities going on around the world that we have to address. None of it is okay. America is funding a lot of death. So yes, okay, let's start here, but then let's how do we keep that going?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the internet's really amped up the inability to learn how to make a nuanced argument for anything. Because if I the way that I worded things when I was in college, I'm sure a lot of it was messy, and I'm sure a lot of it was maybe a little extreme, but I didn't have it public to everybody all the time, and it wasn't getting coverage. And then I eventually learned how to make these nuanced arguments, and that's a necessary part of development. And in the same way that we have improv shows that are live streamed now, and for people just starting out doing improv, they don't take risks on stage anymore because they know that it can be blown up everywhere. So, they can get canceled if they, and that's not to say that people should do, racist things on stage or things like that. There are things I'm not proud of that I did in a black box theater when I was younger that I'm not gonna do anymore. But, I learned it was a bad idea by trying it once and going, oh, that was bad. That really felt bad. And now I'm, stewing on it. But in the same way, college kids going out to protests, In high school we made dead baby jokes and those were not funny. We lacked the perspective to kind of try them in an adult space and go, "Oh, that was bad. Maybe we shouldn't do that." And that's actually really weighty for people. And I just think like a lot of these protests, people get to these arrests faster. They get to this stuff because people are just throwing things out, seeing if they work. And when they don't, there's actual real consequences to those actions.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. The protests often in these cases, and partly because it's young people, they become more about the protests themselves than once the Colombia president arrests them, then they really do care more about being arrested and they're being expelled, and all the students come out because out of solidarity with the fellow students who are protesting. And it's, in some ways the issue itself gets buried too. It's hard, especially when you're young and have these things at stake. It's hard to it's hard to stay on track. I mean, luckily there are a lot of teachers kind of trying to work with them and help them understand the history of solidarity and movement building, so they don't fall into some of the traps that all of us do when we're young.
All right.
Okay, so what else do we got?
We have Douglas's friend via text asks, "I'm terrified of the AI state. They are turning people into dough."
Um, and that's it. Okay. I'm
Yep, that's it.
terrified of the AI state. They're turning people into dough. Yes. Um, McLuhan. Let's look to McLuhan. The new medium always turns the last medium into its content, right? That's the way it tends to happen, right? The first content of the internet was television, right? Television and Netflix. It's contained. It's part of the internet. It's the content of the internet. It's no longer like a medium. So by that, artificial intelligence will turn human intelligence into its content. And it will never know it, I guess, is the thing. Because it doesn't really know anything. It's like the next framing medium, but it's not alive. It's turning intelligence awareness. It's turning awareness into content. And I guess not only will it not know it, but I feel like when that's complete, if it ever got complete, then we are basically dead, right? We're living, I guess, in that they need us because they need awareness and consciousness to be churning, but only as its content, or as its first content. I feel like the more hamster wheeled and AI'd we get, the more fully contained, I guess, by AI, the more fully mushed, as he would put it, mushified. The less alive we'll feel and look and everything. And not to be conspiratorial, but systemically, I feel like, the more painful and scary the world looks, the more likely we are to accept that bargain with AI to go in. And once you're in, you think about AI or even just digitality in that sense. It works by abolishing any sense of continuity. AI, like you're saying, all memory is in the present. It's beyond the present shock I was trying to write about. It's impossible to connect any two moments and make sense out of them that way. It's AI exists in the ticks of the clock, and our experience, or what's left of it, is always in the duration. But that, between the ticks, but it's not acknowledged. Anything that doesn't have a data point doesn't exist in that realm. It's this kind of total atomization of our time and our sense of being. And then you can't tell a story in that world or have one. And if you try to tell a story, it's all okay boomer, right? It's like, oh, you and your friggin' linear, nostalgic understanding of duration of time, cause and effect, right? And this goes back to the protest. Entertainment transitions from story and toward pure performativity. It's what you see on Instagram and TikTok, kind of the way that protest has changed to signaling. It's so much like protest, but it's centered on this atomized self. The way that we do it in this environment. It's tricky. I feel like the platforms want us all to live in this precarious, identity obsessed and cognitively neutralized space. This is what I've been fighting against really since my second book, but I guess I failed. And I think I failed because I thought it was the tech that we were up against. And, oh, don't use the tech like this, just use it like that and it will be okay. But no, there were some really smart people using the technology from the very beginning to bring about this outcome. This is what capitalism wanted. And the cure for that, I would say the cure for AI in that way is AA, right? Is if not Alcoholics Anonymous, it's going from the sort of the programmatic to the anarchic, which is what AA is. It was started by an anarchist. It's an anarchist movement. Anarchy is just community without coercion, a club for people who don't join clubs, because we know a social construction when we see one, and we don't want to replace reality with that manufactured thing. So I do think there's a response. It's the same thing we were talking about. The response to authoritarianism really is the same thing as the response to AI. It's community, togetherness, anarchy, local, bottom up, crazy.
Yeah, it is scary. I think I was at so my side hustle is I sell vintage menswear for a guy, and we've been working on eBay, and people have gotten so used to talking to tech support as opposed to a person. And I'll get 10 emails in a row about, is this a scam? How dare you? And they start in this very riled up place. And my the more difficult it becomes to start at a 0 with people. They're starting at an 8 in terms of anxiety and anger, assuming you're an AI, you know? Sorry, that was my alarm. And because the algorithm loves to foment this anxiety and anger, those are the things that AI is going to be perpetuating. I have a do not ever engage in anger policy for myself on social media. But when people do engage in angry posts, whether they like someone who's riled up or they comment on someone they don't agree with, the algorithm starts bumping that to the top of their page. It creates this like physical movement almost, where it feels to your limbic system like, oh, this person is picking a fight with me. And so you start getting riled up. You start feeling the algorithm get you into that, even if you know intellectually that, oh, this is just the algorithm bumping this to my feed. Your limbic system can't tell the difference. It like really can't. It's totally feeling it. It's getting riled up. It's going, oh, this person, let's gear up for battle. So like my worry with AI is that it's going to start gearing us up for battle against non-existent targets.
Right. Because that's the object of its game. That's the state That's the state it wants us. Well, it doesn't want anything, but that's the state the people profiting off its operation want us in. Yeah, and then it's back to all the things that none of us want to do, like stop or breathe or look into other people's eyes, or you know, that's why when you talk about indigeneity, whether it's the indigeneity of the plants in your garden or actual indigenous people and engaging with them, it's not a style statement. It's not even just a political thing. This is an antidote to these layers of abstraction, and the way that these layers of abstraction compel us to join them in this ungrounded nightmare, in this fray, rather than down here with the other people. So maybe, I guess we do one more and
All right, sure.
call this a success. Well, we'll see. We'll let other
Let's
people.
see.
We'll call it a something.
All right, this was from Guru. Guru had a few questions, but I think you made a note about the second one. Do you want me to ask that one?
Sure. I don't remember, but
Let's see. Okay. My question is about internal family systems. What are Doug's thoughts on this psychotherapeutic modalities approach to the self? Does this conception of the self as multiple, as porous, as relational and interconnected change the way we interact with one another?
yeah, coincidentally, I put a mark next to that because coincidentally, Rebecca Giblin, who we had on, she wrote Choke Point Capitalism with Cory Doctorow. She told me to get that book, Internal Family Systems, by, I forget the name of the psychotherapist who wrote it, but it's kind of like, I don't know if you saw the movie Sybil. It was this, or like, or any of those TV movies about a person with multiple personalities, and then they kind of welcome them all back at the end. Well, internal family systems is this idea that you don't have a personality with lots of different parts. You have different people inside you that have risen to the occasion at different parts of your life. You've kind of made this kind of cast of characters that come to your rescue, and that there are a lot of them, you don't like because they're doing stuff that you don't want, but they're trying to protect you, and you kind of have to look at them and say, well, what is it you're doing? Why are you doing this? And how can I satisfy your need to protect me, in another way, now that particular threat isn't there anymore, the thing you were protecting me from. And, I had an experience of it before I even looked at it. This is why the person suggested it, where I was kind of tripping back on my childhood and saw this, this little kid who was sort of the bad kid, or the person that I've looked at as like bad Doug. And I was kind of behind, and it was like telling me, just put your hand on this kid's shoulder. Look, it's like 3 years old. And it's like, he just wants to play. He just wants to play. That's all he wanted. I start crying when I see this little person there, and it's like, that's in some version what this form of therapy is for, is to see those other parts and realize, oh, and then I would think once you can really do that for yourself and embrace all these different people that are functioning in you, and some of them dysfunctioning or functioning effectively in their own way for things that are no longer there, and they've got to learn new things, but you teach them through love and support. Thank you so much for trying to protect me from that person who's now gone, and not in your, not doing whatever their horrible thing they're doing. And it's once you've done that, you can then start looking at other people that way too. Oh, look at them. They're really, oh, poor things. They're really freaked out about this and trying to protect themselves from a threat that's not really there. They're buying too many arms and blowing up people. It's like, oh, I get it. You still think you're there. That's not where you are now. And to, approach each other that way. Yeah, I'm interested in that. It's like, it's the partly, and I think the questioner wrote about this, it's the kind of Buddha nature of contemptible people. It's their circumstances that made them contemptible. It's an appropriate response to an inappropriate situation, and that's, you got to go back to conditions on the ground. What is it that they're responding to? What is it? It's kind of basic Marxism, where you go back to conditions on the ground to see why are people acting this way, rather than just dealing with their characters. It's what I've been talking about lately. It's kind of trying to put the social back into socialism. It's not an accounting method. It's a restoration of the social bonds, and understanding what are different people trying to do to survive and thrive in really difficult situations.
Yeah, that reminds me of a technique that I use to stop getting mad in traffic, because I'd get annoyed because, oh, it's LA, everybody's maniacs. But I started thinking of the people in other cars as little animals, because if a dog is barking at nothing, you kind of just get in this attitude of, oh, what you doing, bud? Instead of being mad. You're not mad at the dog even though it's barking at the wall. You're just, oh, it's just this little creature, got a totally different perspective, and who knows what they're dealing with. And it's completely, just saying out loud, oh, what you doing, bud? Like it's a little animal, has really completely changed how I deal with traffic, and it's so helpful.
Oh, that's great. It's such a beautiful way of metabolizing, and that's the thing, of metabolizing the fear and trauma and whatever else is being thrown at you. And you have to hope on some level it helps the person that you're responding to. Well, it's certainly better than back at them. You see little schnauzers get all upset, and the Labrador's just like, oh, okay, little guy. They don't even, it's sort of, you're doing that. It's like, all right, I get it. You're yapping at something. All right. What's up? What's that? I like that. I mean, yeah, I guess if it's an internal little part of you that's yapping, you kind of then have to sit and really talk to it and find out what are you barking at? What are you barking at? It's okay, little buddy. What are you barking at? Yeah. You pet it and put the little hand up for it to lick the hand. It's okay. It's okay. So you could try to bite it if you want, but it's just a hand. Yeah. We'll see. I guess that's the primary school version of Team Human, right? It's how do we see each other as, less as threats and more as just troubled family members, right? Troubled family. Aw. Well, yeah. And it's funny because the all the different people inside us, which is that family therapy or internal family modality. It reminds me of which I should plug, your last record, 1,000 masks, right? 1,000 masks, there's 1,000 masks that each of us have and use. That's a very fun record for kind of thinking about some of the different ways that we enact ourselves in the world. So I guess I should thank everybody. So thank you all for being on Team Human today. This was a community event, and hopefully these engagements are interesting and fun. We'll listen to it. We'll listen to it tonight and see what we think. I was accompanied, and I'll learn how to be accompanied better over time by our Discord superstar, author, animator, songwriter, Brenna Campbell. Thank you so much for being here and for helping me be more human.
Yeah, this is fun.
Cool. All right. So we'll see you next time. Hopefully this will make it to air. You've been on Team Human, our last best hope for peeps.